Hello students, welcome to my class. So in this video we will be discussing about treatment of toxicology due to inorganic. This topic is majorly focused on to speaking about what are the toxic effect of different metal ions that are present and how this toxicity can be controlled or how it can be detoxified. So, to begin with, what is metal ion toxicity? It is due to the essential metal ions whenever they are present in slightly higher concentration in our body, that is more than the required amount, then it can lead to metal ion toxicity. And there are also some toxic metal ions. These toxic metal ions, they are not required by our body at all. So when they are present in small, low concentration in our body also, it can lead to metal ion toxicity. And this metal ion toxicity can further lead to different problems like diseases and also ultimately death as well. Okay, so we are studying about general aspects of mechanisms of metal ion toxicity. That is, how in different ways this metal ion toxicity is caused. First is through electrolyte imbalance. So you know that our body has all these electrolytes that are nothing but your alkali and alkali earth cations like sodium, potassium, calcium, magnesium, and there are different pumps like sodium potassium pump, calcium pump, magnesium pump, etc. Correct. So why are these electrolytes required? Because for the proper functioning of your kidney and maintaining your cardiac activity, muscle activity, blood pressure, nerve activity, all of these things. So a proper electrolyte balance is required for all the functioning of these different organs of your body. But in case, in any way that if you consume excess of metal ion or there is accumulation of excess of one particular metal ion in your body, then that will create an electrolyte imbalance. Compared to the others, that metal ion will be in larger extent. Therefore, an imbalance is created that can further lead to toxicity in your body and dysfunctioning of different organs. Second one is alteration of membrane permeability. Now we all know that in the cell there is a membrane that allows only certain type of ions to enter the cell or only certain type of ions to leave the cell. Correct. Not all of the ions are allowed to enter the cell, so that is controlled by this semi permeable membrane of the cell. But if by any chance what happens here is that these toxic metals or metals that are in higher amount, they will come and attach to the membrane, because of which the property of the membrane is altered. And because of that, the permeability also changes and the membrane can no longer control what ion is entering or what ion is leaving. So the permeability character of the membrane is altered. Next is the replacement of certain active moieties. So here what happens is that one particular metal ion, mostly the toxic metal ion, which has a size comparable to that of the other metal ion, replaces that other metal ion. So one best example is phosphate. The oxides of phosphate that are already present in the body and they are required for catalyzing different reaction. These phosphates, they have similar to size to that of vanadium or arsenic. So the oxides of the phosphate, they are replaced by oxides of vanadium or arsenic, and they can go and alter, that is they will not catalyze the reaction that was supposed to be catalyzed, so they are like a toxic that is present here. Next is deposition of excess metal ions. Here what happens in that some of your organs there is excess deposition of the metal ion, because of which it can lead to organ failures or different diseases. And also one thing you have to note that these metal ions, in case they have lipophilic groups or a membrane lipophilic group surrounding them, because of this property they can easily pass through the blood brain barrier, because of which they can enter your brain. Okay, and that can cause like brain cancer or a person can become brain dead. because these metal ions have reached the brain and they can directly enter because of having lipophilic groups. Next is oxidizing activity, that is a metal ion that is present in the body can undergo oxidation, or it can oxidize some other metal ion and can generate free radicals in the body. And you know that free radicals, they are highly reactive and also carcinogenic, like that of chromium free radical that is generated also acts as cancer causing agent. And next one is cell damage by radiation from radioactive element. Here what happens is that if a person is continuously being exposed to small dose of radioactive element, and you know that these elements, they expose radiations which are not good for the cell, that is those radiations can cause cell mutation. And that was what happened to Marie Curie when she was working with the radionucleotides for her Nobel Prize, and then she got exposed unknowingly to all these radioactive element, and because of which she ultimately got cancer and died. So what happens is that whenever you are exposed to these radioactive element, your genes undergo mutation, because of which you can get cancer. Next is interference through competitive inhibition. So, competitive inhibition, as in, is the interruption of a chemical pathway owing to one chemical substance inhibiting the effect of another by competing with it. That is, what happens is that one particular metal ion, say if in case if we're talking about enzyme competitive inhibition, what happens, one particular metal ion was supposed to go and bind to the target site of that enzyme, okay, but what happens, this new metal ion which is toxic comes and competes with that metal ion which is supposed to go and bind to the target site. The actual metal ion which is supposed to go and bind, this new one that is coming is competing with that and going and binding to the target site before that, because of which now the target site is unavailable for the one which actually had to bind. Like, see, in case of selenium, it takes the place of sulfur in sulfur containing amino acid. So actually sulfur should have, those were sulfur containing amino acid, and sulfur should have been attached over there, but due to competitive inhibition, selenium goes first and takes that site, occupies that place. So this type of protein, that is sulfur containing amino acid, is seen in keratin. That is keratin protein seen in your hair, nails, and even in animals in their hoofs, etc. Correct. But what happens, because if the body contains excess selenium, instead of sulfur, selenium goes and takes that place, and this causes selenium toxicity. Same way, cadmium can replace calcium in your bones, and phosphates can be replaced by vanadium, etc. So this is nothing but your competitive inhibition. Next is interference with the protein and enzymatic process. So as the name is telling you, what is it telling, that these toxic metal ions, they interfere with the proteins and the different enzymatic process. Especially what they're doing is that different metalloenzymes will be there. Correct? We already studied about metalloenzymes. These are the enzymes that will have a central metal ion. So what are these doing is that the toxic metal ions will replace the central metal ion in these metalloenzymes, because of which the enzyme property will get altered and the enzyme might get deactivated also. It might not work at all. So in enzymes, there are these SH groups, okay. So what do these heavy metals like mercury, cadmium, arsenic, etc., they have high affinity towards this SH groups. They come and interact with these SH groups and they replace the hydrogens of these groups, okay. So enzymes having these SH groups, these heavy metal ions or toxic metal ions in the body, they have high affinity towards these groups. They come towards these groups, they replace the two hydrogen and take its place, okay, because of which the enzyme's property is altered. It is not the same now. It cannot function the same way because of attachment of heavy metal ions. And the invading metal ions, they replace native metal ions, that is which are already present in the metalloenzymes. Like one example is in case of carboxypeptidase. You know that zinc is a major metal ion in case of carboxypeptidase. But zinc is replaced by mercury, lead, cadmium, and many other. And this can lead to enzyme getting inactivated. Same way, PB, it can inhibits alkaline phosphates, adenosine triphosphates, and carbonic hydrase. That is, it can deactivate all these types of enzymes. Okay, in several types of enzymes inhibited by cadmium are adenosine triphosphate, alcohol dehydrogenase, carbonic anhydrase, etc. Okay. So also what happens is that some of the metal binding sites, they contain soft donor sites. That is, these enzymes or metal binding sites, they will be soft donor sites, and they preferably want to form bonding with soft metals. That is, native metal is already there, that is the metal that is already present, but these soft donor sites, they prefer soft metals. You know that in metals there is classification, soft and hard metals, correct? So these toxic metals, if they are soft in nature, they can replace these native metals and bind there, because the donor sites are soft in nature. And if the metal binding sites, if they contain amino or imino group, then they have more affinity towards copper, cobalt or nickel. So these copper, cobalt or nickel can come and substitute the already present metal ion. But because of this replacement that is happening, the enzyme property will get altered, or it might get denatured. But this is not always the case, students. There is one exception here, that not always, whenever a metal ion in the metalloprotein or enzyme is replaced and some other metal ion, toxic metal ion, comes and takes its position, most of the time the enzyme gets denatured or it won't function. But sometimes it will function better than before. Okay, that happens in case of, it may be noted that sometimes the enzyme activity may not be lost through substitution. That is, in case of carboxypeptidase, zinc, when it is substituted with cobalt, the enzyme activity, instead of decreasing, it increased. That is, this substitution turned out to be good and the enzyme property became better. Next is, same way, you should know some examples, and you should know that what type of enzymes are deactivated by what type of metals, like all these examples. Okay. And one thing you have to note, that GSH, that is glutathione, it can protect the enzymes from the attack of these metal ions. Okay, how does GSH do that? Is that GSH forms a bond or forms a complex with that incoming metal ion or that toxic metal ion, because of which that metal ion is not free at all to go and replace some other metal ion in its site. Okay, so GSH is one such protein that can protect the enzymes from getting deactivated. That is by forming bond with this incoming toxic metal ion. Next, we are talking about another important topic, that is biomethylation. Now, what is biomethylation, students? We already studied this. Whenever a free heavy metal ion is there in the nature, due to different enzymes or vitamins like vitamin B12, etc., addition of methyl group to that heavy metal ion takes place, because of which that metal ion becomes much more toxic than how much it was before. Okay, so its toxicity will increase to a larger extent when it gets methylated. That is called as biomethylation. That is addition of methyl group to this free heavy metal ions that are present. So what are three ways of biomethylation is, one is carbanion transfer or by free radical transfer, that will lead to one electron oxidation of the acceptor, or one more way is carbonium ion transfer, that will lead to two electron transfer of the acceptor. And what are the different methylating agents? One major one we studied, that was vitamin B12, and one more is SAM, that is S-adenosyl methionine. And we also studied about METHF, that is N5-methyl tetrahydrofolate. So these are some of the biomethylating agents that is present in the nature. Okay. One example of biomethylation of mercury that was widely studied was Minamata disease that occurred in Japan in the year 1953, and it caused a death of lot of people. And how did this happen was that there was an aldehyde producing industry just beside the Minamata Bay in Japan. So, what this industry did is that they used to discharge their waste after manufacturing aldehyde, especially in that industry, they used mercury as a catalyst. So, all this mercury waste was not treated properly and it was directly discharged to the bay. So what happened there is that in the water bodies, the biomethylation of this mercury took place in the presence of anaerobic methanogenic bacteria. So whatever bacteria were there, and this process was catalyzed by methylcobalamin, that is vitamin B12. So these bacteria, they methylated the mercury that was discharged, that was present in the body, to biomethylated form, and this form, actually mercury in just Hg2 plus is non-toxic, but when it is in the form of CH3 Hg plus, it becomes very very toxic. Next, it further underwent one more process of biomethylation to have 2-methyl group. So what happened is that once this has got biomethylated, this is present in the water body, and in water, you know, there are a lot of fishes and there are planktons that consume this. So it got into their body and it further got bioamplified. What is bioamplification? Is increasing of concentration of these toxic chemicals throughout the fruit chain. The concentration of these toxic chemical doubles as it passes through the food chain. So first it was consumed by planktons and small fishes, in which the concentration was comparatively less. From that it went to bird's body, that is whenever the bird feeded on these fishes or plankton, it got into the bird's body where the concentration almost doubled. Okay, then these small fishes were consumed by large fishes where the concentration almost doubled. That is, concentration increased by the factor of 10 raised to 3. So, are you understanding? The concentration of this chemical that initially came from water is going on doubling as we go through the food chain. After that, these large fishes will be consumed by human beings, correct? So, we will have a high concentration of this chemical in our body. That is called as biomethylation, and ultimately it leads to toxicity in the body of different organisms involved in the food chain. So, some of the chemical symptoms of biomethylated mercury toxicity are: the person can lose sensation and inability to coordinate, slurred speech, deafness, coma, and extreme level of toxicity can also lead to death. One more drawback of this is that this particular biomethylated mercury, it is lipid soluble. We already studied, if it's lipid soluble, what happens? It can enter the brain, okay, where it will get accumulated in the brain. Also, it tightly bonds to the SH groups of the enzyme. That is, it can replace the H and go and bind over there, because of which it can deactivate different enzymes. So how to reduce this toxicity is: one is, it is possible with selenium. It can reduce the toxicity caused by both organic and inorganic mercury. So how does selenium do is that it occupies the target site by displacing the toxic Hg. So it has this ability to displace Hg from the active site, and selenium is much less harmful compared to that of mercury. One more thing you need to know, that there are different biomethylation occurs of other different elements. That is, we just studied about mercury, so arsenic, lead, thallium, etc. also can undergo biomethylation in the similar way. But sometimes the biomethylated metal ion is less toxic compared to that of the metal ion itself. That happens in the case of thallium. So in case of thallium, the biomethylated thallium is less toxic compared to thallium itself. So what does thallium usually do is that it competes with K plus, because it has similar size as that of K plus. So it can compete with K plus and displace K plus in different enzymes or different enzymatic pathways, etc. Okay, so it acts as a competitive inhibitor, thallium. But when thallium is present in biomethylated form, its oxidation state changes to 3. Okay, but at this time, its size is not comparable to that of K plus, so it cannot displace K plus. Only when calcium is present in free form, its oxidation state is 1. That time it can replace K plus, but when it is in biomethylated form, its oxidation state is plus 3, therefore it cannot replace potassium. So this is one good thing that sometimes the biomethylated form are not that toxic as the metal ion itself. Similarly, biomethylation of mercury also occurs, sorry, arsenic also occurs, and the methylated form of arsenic is less toxic compared to that of arsenic itself. Next, we are moving on to the next topic, that is toxic effect of metal ions. So we are individually studying about what are the toxic effects of different metal ions and how they can be detoxified. So the first toxicity we are talking about is ion toxicity. Ion toxicity can happen due to different reasons. The first thing might be due to excess intake of FeSO4 tablet. So some people they take these multivitamins tablets for excess, nutrient and vitamin requirement. But if that becomes excess, then that person might suffer due to ion toxicity if that person is consuming a lot of FeSO4 tablets. And this can lead to the erosion of the gastrointestinal tract. So you all know that intestine is a place where absorption of mineral from the food occurs. So if that tract gets eroded, proper absorption will not take place. Okay, and chronic ion poisoning, it is due to regular intake of food from iron vessels. So if this case was seen in a disease called as African cirrhosis that was seen in Bantu tribe in South Africa. So what they used to do is that they used to consume beer that was brewed in iron pots on regular basis, because of which some of the iron from those pots have got accumulated in the beer that was being consumed, and then hence it got entered into the body and got deposited in liver, heart and kidney. So this is one of the case where there was example for chronic iron poisoning. Then there is one more disease called as a hemosidrosis. Here the deposition of iron occurs in different parts of the body. This is seen in patients who get repeated blood transfusion, because blood, hemoglobin, it contains iron in it. So the person who is getting repeated blood transfusion can get this particular disease, that is hemosidrosis, where there is deposition of iron in different organs of the body. Next, there is a genetic disorder that is called as hemochromatosis. Okay, here what happens, once again there is deposition of iron in vital organs like liver, spleen, pancreas, and this is due to the breakdown of the blood cells. Okay, your blood cells rupture and iron is released, and then it goes and gets accumulated. And here, because of this disease, there is cirrhosis of liver, pancreatic fibrosis, and brown pigmentation of the skin. And because of this bronze color of the skin, this disease is also called as bronze diabetes. Okay. So how to treat all these diseases, that is iron related problem, is you're using an chelating antidote. A chelating antidote is nothing but it can bind to the iron, it can form a complex with iron. Hence iron won't be free to go and get accumulated in different parts of the body, and then it is easily excreted out of the body. So such an ionophore, an example is desferoxime, where it has high affinity for iron and it can go and form a bond with iron. Next is toxicity due to copper. One major disease that is caused due to toxicity of copper is Wilson's disease. So here what happens that in a healthy adult, copper will be around 200 to 300 milligram that is present. Whereas in this disease, the copper content will be more than 100 times greater than that of the normal adult's copper concentration. Okay, so the patient having this disease will have 100 times more concentration of copper than that of the healthy individual. So what are some of the symptoms and uh, symptoms of this disease are there is liver damage, there is neurological damage, and there is brown or green ring in the cornea of the eyes, and the patient will lack coordination and he will possess mental deterioration. That is, mentally, that person will not be stable. And other characteristics or features of this disease are low level of copper in plasma, and there is increased excretion of copper in the urine. Okay, because there's a lot of copper in the body, so the body will try to excrete as much as possible through the urine. And high absorption of copper is seen, renal damage is seen, and all these symptoms are seen because of excess copper in the body. And these copper, they will first get deposited in the liver and then they will damage the central nervous system, that is CNS. Okay, so how is this disease caused is because one is that patient has low level of aceruloplasmin. So aceruloplasmin is a type of protein that is responsible for copper transport in the body. Because of low level of this particular protein and because of genetic failure to synthesize this protein, there is no proper copper storage and transportation protein in the body. So the excess copper that is present will all get into the bloodstream and then move to different organs. One more thing that might happen is that the Wilson copper transporting ATPase, there is a mutation of these ATPase which is responsible for providing copper to different parts of the body. Okay, to different proteins. So because of the mutation of this ATPase, the gene mutation that occurs, also that disease, this particular disease, that is copper toxicity, can happen. So in this disease, a large amount of copper, first what happens, these copper, excess copper will get into your blood streams, then they will slowly start from the blood, they will start depositing in your liver as well as in your brain, causing you all the neurological problems and hepatic problems. Another reason is this metallothionein, that is a particular copper storage protein. It will have an abnormal structure. Because of its abnormal structure, it is not able to efficiently store copper in itself, because of which copper gets distributed in the bloodstream. Next is what are the different treatments that is used to treat this type of disease, that is copper toxicity. One are definitely consuming different drugs like Na2CA or 2,3 dimercapto propanol or D-penicillin, etc. These drugs are recommended. Or triene, it is also a type of drug that is used. What does it do is that it allows the excretion of copper through urine. So it makes sure that as much as the copper that is present in the body is thrown out from the body through the urine. That is by consuming triene drug. Also, zinc is also recommended when there is excess copper in the body. Consuming zinc salts are recommended. Why is this? Is because it induces the production of thionine protein. So what this thionine protein does is that in the intestine, this thionine protein goes and binds to the copper that is given out from the food. Different metal ions, minerals are given out from the food that we consume. So what does this thionine do is that the copper that is given out from the food is binded to this thionine protein, and it prevents the absorption of that copper. Because of that binding, forming bond with the copper, it prevents absorption of copper through the intestine. Therefore, copper is not being absorbed because already there is excess of copper in the body, so that absorption is prevented. Also, other than that, this protein also prevents reabsorption of copper that is secreted from the gastric juice and saliva. Okay, so it prevents intestinal absorption as well as it prevents reabsorption of copper. One more the way to prevent copper toxicity is by using tetrathiomolybdate. So it can also prevent absorption of copper because it forms an insoluble copper thiomolybdate in the gut. So because of that complex formation, it prevents the absorption of copper. And zinc therapy, it is most probably preferred because it shows low toxicity. That is, side effects because of the zinc therapy is very low. Hence, that is preferred. Next is arsenic poisoning. So the reason for arsenic poisoning, first main reason is excessive withdrawal of groundwater. So you know that in the ground, underground, there are ores or mineral deposits that maybe happened a long time ago, millions of years ago. Under the soil, there is mineral deposits. Same way, there is underground, there is iron pyrite deposit that contains the mineral that is arsenic in it. Okay, this particular deposit that is there in several layers under the soil that contains arsenic. But because we are doing several, because of the high population now, water demand also increases. So demand for underground water, fresh water has increased. So there is excessive underground water withdrawal by different methods. Different pumps are put in different places in order to withdraw this underground water. So what happens because of that is that a lot of places are being dug, correct, and soil is removed, and this lower layer, that is the mineral containing layer of the soil, comes in contact with the outside air, because of which, because of this excessive withdrawal of groundwater, the zone of aeration has increased, meaning to say this mineral layer which was there several layers under the ground, because of excessive demand for groundwater, we are digging lot of areas, and this lower layer comes in contact with air, which this is called as a zone of aeration. That is that layer coming in contact with air, and consequently this arsenopyrite, that is a mineral, it comes in contact with air. What happens when it comes in contact with air? When it comes in contact with air, there is the formation oxidation that leads to the formation of secondary minerals, scorolite, that is FeASO4.2H2. That is, this mineral deposit, when it comes in contact with air, it leads to the formation of secondary mineral, and then again this is formed from the primary mineral, that is FeAsF. That is an arsenic deposit that was present beneath the land, has come in contact with air. It will lead to the formation of scorolite when it comes in contact with air and water. So these are the reactions that are showing the deposit when it is exposed to air. What happens? Air, that is oxygen. There is release of arsenic and there is formation of scorolite. As you see in the step, when it comes in contact with the water and air, there is formation of scorolite. What happens to this scorolite? It gets into the water. Since it has two molecules of water, it gets accumulated in the water, and that water is then used for irrigation, and animals consume it, and humans also consume that groundwater, correct? That's how arsenic will get into our body. So the main reason for arsenic poisoning is excess withdrawal of groundwater, and leading to all these reaction and leading to aeration of this arsenic deposit that is found in the soil. What also happens is that the acid mine drainage, I don't know if you have heard of acid mine drainage. Acid mine drainage is nothing but when there is water flowing, this flowing water, when it comes in contact with the rocks that is there beside it, if that rock is rich in sulfur or different, sulfur deposits, that sulfur deposit will get into the water, correct? Because of which the water will become pH of the water will become acidic, because sulfur is getting into water, getting mixed. So excess of H plus ion content will be there in the water, so as water will indirectly become acidic in nature. So what is happening in this acid mine drainage is that the run of water, when it comes in contact with these rocks that are containing sulfur and different minerals, they react with the water, they get into the water, and when they are exposed to air, obviously atmospheric air is there, it gets converted into sulfuric acid or dissolved ions. So in water we will have sulfuric acid, and because of which the pH of this water becomes less. This reducing pH of the water, it indirectly hydrolyzes the ferric arsenate or ferric arsenide that is present in the water. Okay, that's why you get because of hydrolysis of this ferric arsenate or ferric arsenide, you get different arsenic products that gets accumulated in the groundwater. This groundwater is then consumed by us. Correct. Once we consume it, that arsenic content goes into our body. Also, arsenic can be in the soil because it's a content that is present in insecticides, herbicides, fungicides. So arsenic can get into the soil through that way also and then get mixed in the water. Next is how is this removal of arsenic done from groundwater? One thing what they do is that they allow this water to stand. In a large tank, this water is made to stand because of which there is oxidation. When it is exposed to atmospheric air, this groundwater undergoes oxidation and the Fe2 that is present in the water, it is oxidized to Fe3. And when it becomes Fe3, it is thrown out in the form of precipitate that is FeOH thrice. Along with this, arsenic is co-precipitated. That's how, if you effectively separate that precipitate from water, you can separate arsenic from the water. One more way is laterite treatment, where they are making this water pass through grained laterite, because of which it removes arsenic from the groundwater. Another way to remove arsenic from drinking water is by oxidation of arsenic that is present in the +3 oxidation state to 5 oxidation state. This is done by adding bleaching powder or KMnO4 to water, and then this is followed by co-precipitation. Once that arsenic is oxidized to 5 oxidation state, it is co-precipitated as ASO43 minus. This co-precipitation is done by adding Fe and or aluminium salts. It will lead to co-precipitation of arsenic. Speaking of biochemical aspects of arsenic poisoning, arsenic is very toxic. That is, out of all the different arsenic species, arsenic, when it is present in +3 oxidation state, it's said to be most toxic because it is soft in nature. And you know that time we studied that when it is soft metal, it prefers soft metal binding sites, so it can go to the enzyme and it can replace the SH groups. That is, it can replace the hydrogens from the SH groups of the enzyme, and it can deactivate the enzymatic process. Also, it will bind with the keratin disulfides that is present in your hair, nail, and skin. This can lead to hair fall, nail will easily get broken off, or skin cancer can also occur. Okay, so some of the symptoms of arsenic poisoning is loss of appetite, gastrointestinal problem, constipation, skin problems, skin cancer, etc. And how is the toxicity? Arsenic in +3 oxidation state is the most toxic, and we also know that arsenic can undergo biomethylation in the presence of different aerobic and anaerobic bacteria. So toxicity order, when it is in arsenic +3 oxidation state, it is highest toxic. Then comes the +5 oxidation state. Then comes the 1 methylated form, where it is having one methyl group, and the least toxic out of all these are the ones containing two methyl groups. Okay, so some of organoarsenic compounds, they're also found in seafood that we consume, but these are found to be non-toxic in nature, which are present. So what are the symptoms? The initial symptoms are very less, that is keratosis, that is excess hair fall and other things, and dermatitis, wherein your skin will have rashes, irritation, etc. Extreme cases will lead to melanosis and neural problems, and then ultimately the last stage would be developing a cancer, that is skin cancer. So, what are the different types of enzyme that arsenic can deactivate? One, you know that it can interact with the SH groups of the different enzymes such as succinooxidase, pyruvate dehydrogenase, and it can inhibit enzymes like DNA ligase, methyltransferase, glutathione reductase. So, all these enzymes will have their own activity, will have their own importance. Whenever arsenic binds with the SH group of these enzyme, it will get deactivated. So different body activity, body functions will not function as it is expected to function. Arsenic, it is also said to have carcinic activity, although it does not directly interact or damage the DNA, but it is involved in the same way. It binds to the SH group of the enzyme that is involved in DNA repair mechanism. So there is an enzyme that is required for DNA repairing. What does arsenic do? It goes and binds with the SH group of that enzyme, because of which the DNA repairing process will not continue, will not take place, because of which DNA will indirectly get damaged, and therefore DNA damage means it leads to mutation and finally cancer. Therefore, arsenic will do that. One of the example that is given here is that of polymerase, which has two of these SH groups, wherein arsenic will go and bind, and then it will inhibit the property of that particular enzyme. Also, arsenic, it has a shape very much comparable shape and geometry as that of phosphorus. Therefore, it can replace phosphorus in certain different enzymes like RNA polymerase, adenyl cyclase, etc. Also, 3-arsenopyruvate, it does competitive inhibition. You know what is competitive inhibition? One metal ion competes to bind to the target site, correct, of the enzyme. So it does competitive inhibition with phosphophenol pyruvate mutase, and this particular enzyme, that is phosphophenol pyruvate mutase, it is required for the synthesis of CP bonds, that is carbon phosphorus bond in the living bodies. But because of arsenic interfering in this step, the synthesis of the CP bonds will not take place. Next is arsenic can also interfere in the production of ATP. How does this happen is because oxides of arsenic, they have similar structure compared to that of oxides of phosphate. So what this arsenic does is that in order to synthesize ATP, this process, that is oxidative phosphorylation of DPG from glyceraldehyde 3 phosphate should occur. Okay, but what happens, because arsenic is interfering here, oxidative phosphorylation happens, but it produces some other product which gets spontaneously hydrolyzed, which does not generate ATP. So a step that was supposed to go in some other pathway is taking another pathway because of interference, because of arsenic. Okay, and so there is no generation of ATP. Hence, enough ATP molecules are not generated, and you know ATP is very much required in different maybe photosynthesis or even in human body, due to because of mitochondrial activity, respiration, everything ATP is required. But enough ATP is not generated because of arsenic interference. What else does arsenic do is also it denatures different proteins, that is, it attacks the SH group, hence the protein structure is distorted, hence it denatures different protein. So, summing up all that we have studied, what are the different ways in which arsenic is causing toxification is by blocking the SH group, by competitive inhibition of different enzymes, and by denaturing different protein. And what is a method of denaturing, detoxification of arsenic in the body is by using different drugs. That is, one that they have recommended is 2,3 dimercaptopropanol, that is BAL, and D-penicillamine. This is the two drugs that are required in order to detoxify the body from arsenic poisoning. So we already studied how mercury is biomethylated and how mercury toxicity occurs. So mercury is present where in different electrochemical industry, mercury is majorly used in electrode. Have you heard of mercury electrode? So it is very, very common, and also it is used in different electrical apparatus, in thermometers and all of that. in fact, it is also a component in the pesticides and fungicides. So that is how it gets into the soil, and then it gets mixed with the soil, and then in the when it comes to the environment through soil, or if it gets into water, then it is easy for it to get biomethylated in presence of different biomethylating aerobic and anaerobic bacteria and vitamin B12. Correct. So, what you need to understand is that this element Hg is actually non-toxic in nature, but when it is converted into CH3Hg plus, this is the most toxic form of mercury. Whereas this element Hg itself, it is non-toxic in nature. When does it get converted into this form? In the presence of anaerobic microorganisms. And this HgS is another form, that is mercuric sulfide. It is insoluble and it will remain trapped in the soil, and it is also non-toxic in nature. So mercury can exist in different form. One is as Hg, another is this most toxic form. Then there is HgS. Then there is Hg2 2 plus. That is, this also has low toxicity, and in stomach it forms insoluble Hg2Cl2, which will be excreted through our fecus. So one is this Hg2 plus, it cannot pass through the biological membrane, but when it gets converted into CH3Hg plus, we already studied this, it becomes lipophilic, it can enter your brain, and hence it can lead to brain damage. So, what are the different toxicity that is caused by Hg? One is that this Hg compound, they can bind with the SH groups of the protein and enzyme, and you know that when that happens, they denature the enzyme or deactivate the enzyme, and thus by binding like that, they can interact with hemoglobin or serum albumin. Now, hemoglobin is very important in our body, that is for transportation of oxygen. But when this toxicity of Hg occurs to hemoglobin, proper transportation might not take place. And this biomethylated mercury, it is also found to bind with glutathione in the red blood cells of our body. Plus, one more thing is that this bond that Hg forms with carbon, it will remain, it's very strong, and it is retained for a very long period of time. So, Hg can remain accumulated in the cells and tissues for a very long time. And this, you already know that this is lipid soluble, so it can enter your brain tissues. And because it remains for a very long time in your body, it can pass from a pregnant mother to its baby. Whenever the baby is there in the mother's womb, if the mother has mercury toxicity, is infected with that, then this, because mercury is accumulated in the cells and tissues of the mother, it can pass on to the baby, and it can cause several congenital defects. That is, the baby that is born will be born with some kind of syndrome or defect. One more way in which Hg becomes toxic is that it will go and attach to the membrane. Okay, so we already studied when it goes and attaches to the membrane, what happens? The membrane's property changes, because of which the membrane cannot perform active transport of glucose, and membrane will not have affinity for K plus ion. This will further induce cerebral plasmy and different neurological problem, and it can also damage the central nervous system. And also this biomethylated mercury, it will attack the chromosomes and it will prevent cell division. So overall speaking, what are the different problems that are caused by mercury toxicity? One is enzyme can be inhibited, cellular dysfunction can take place, neurological dysfunction can take place, and also earthism. Okay, these are the different toxicity that are caused by mercury. So how does mercury get detoxified? How is a method to detoxify mercury is, these bacteria that are present in the soil, they have developed a resistance towards this mercury, because already our entire soil everywhere is so polluted that the bacteria, they have to get adapted to that kind of soil. So they have developed a gene which is resistant to mercury. That is, that particular gene can convert toxic mercury to its non-toxic form, Hg plus 2 to Hg having no oxidation state. So that type of bacteria, if the gene that is responsible for the detoxification or conversion of mercury, that gene, that is mercury lyase or mercury reductase, if that gene can be extracted from that bacteria and used in higher organisms, then we can be successful in mercury detoxification. So this is a method of natural detoxification, that is the bacteria, they've developed this method. So lead, what is the source of lead in our nature is they are used in different petroleum industry, especially in the cracking process. So they are used as anti-knock compounds in gasoline. It is the main source of lead accumulation in the environment because this cracking process goes through free radical mechanism. Therefore, it requires lead there. So that process, that is cracking process of petroleum product, is a main process that leads to accumulation of lead. So this lead that comes out in that process, it goes into the atmosphere and there it will get hydrolyzed in the presence of moist air. So oxidation and hydrolysis takes place to give lead oxide. And these lead oxide particles, they are present in the atmosphere, and you know that if it's in the atmosphere, it comes into the plants as well as humans who breathe this air. Okay, and that's how it will get accumulated in our body. And also some industries are also responsible for giving out lead into the environment through soil and other water, where lead waste is improperly disposed into the water bodies, and lead can get accumulated in the water as well. So what happens if a person is suffering from PB poisoning is main thing is anemia. Why does anemia happen if the person is suffering from PB poisoning is because it disrupts or it interferes in the biosynthesis of porphyrin. Porphyrin ring, is a major part of the heme protein. Heme protein or hemoglobin is required for the transport of oxygen. So what this lead is doing is that it is disrupting or interfering in the biosynthesis of porphyrin, because of which hemoglobin cannot be synthesized, because of which oxygen cannot be carried, and hence the person will suffer from anemia. So lot of anemic patient may be in that condition because of PB poisoning. So how does this do it is that there is an enzyme for the synthesis of porphyrin ring, that is ALAD, that is alpha amino aluminate dehydrase enzyme, that is required for the synthesis of this porphyrin ring. But what does PB do is that it interacts with this alpha ALA dehydrase enzyme and it inhibits with the formation of the ring or that porphinobinogen. So PB2 plus, what does it do? How does it interact with this enzyme? Is that that enzyme has a native ion or a metal ion that is present in it, that is Zn2 plus. It interacts with that ion, metal ion, and it replaces Zn2 plus and itself goes and sits over there. Because of which that enzyme becomes denatured or deactivated. Hence it cannot synthesize the porphyrin ring, and ultimately there is no production of hemoglobin. So this can affect, ultimately disrupt the synthesis of hemoglobin and other heme containing protein also like cytochromes. And PB2 plus, other than that, it can also interfere with the Ca2 plus activity, and it can cause bone problems also, because Ca2 plus is majorly present in your bones. And also it can damage the mitochondria of the kidney. Kidney, is very, very important for the selective absorption of glucose, amino acid, phosphate, etc. But because it is affecting the mitochondria of the kidney, effective absorption will not take place. That is, all the essential mineral will go out of the body through urine. And it can also damage your gastrointestinal tract where absorption will take place. So, what are the symptoms of lead poisoning? The clinical symptoms, they include joint pain, anemia, muscle pain, depression, and in many higher cases, damage of the nervous system as well. So, summarizing how the lead affects, lead poisoning, it affects us is through cellular dysfunction, kidney impairment, neurological problem is caused, behavioral problem, and reproductive problems are also caused. And lead poisoning is majorly seen in children because they are often used to chewing anything at all. anything they get, or they will chew without knowing what are its side effects. So if they chew, lead is present in most of the other, like rods or anything, it has lead, so that way it can get into their body. Also in paints we have lead, and that's how lead can get into the body. Okay. And initial stages of lead poisoning, what happens, lead is actually stored in inert form in your bones and it won't cause much effect. But when the body requires calcium or phosphorus, these bones, they start to give out elements that is present in them. That is, along with calcium or phosphorus, lead is also given out, and that's how lead gets into the blood and causes toxification. Okay. And detoxification is done using Ca2, CaNA2, that is EDTA, or in the you can also consume BAL, BAL, and DPA, etc. These are all used for detoxification of lead. Next is cyanide. Cyanide is one of the most common poison that you've heard of. It is actually seen in seeds of some fruits, even apple seeds, they have cyanide in them, and it occurs in seeds of fruits such as apricots, cherries, peaches, plums, etc. And in these plants, they are in the form of bounded form to the glycoside, that is called as amygdalin. So this is amygdalin. It's in the form of sugar. It is bound form. Okay, cyanide is present in the bound form, so it is not in free form. But when this species, it undergoes hydrolysis or enzymatic or acid hydrolysis, that majorly happens in our stomach. When this reaches the stomach, that's why you're not supposed to eat the seeds, because they have the cyanide content in them. When they reach your stomach, you know that there are different acids that act on the food. When they undergo acid hydrolysis, that cyanide is released and it is in free form. And how else is cyanide coming into the environment? It is used in different industries, fumigating agents in order to destroy the rodents that feed on the grains, or it can be used in buildings and shipping industries. Also, it is used for metal cleaning and electroplating industries. So, cyanide in this form will get into the environment. And cyanide, how does it work? Is it one thing is it inhibits oxidative phosphorylation. It's an important process in the body that is inhibited by cyanide. Okay, so there is no enough supply of oxygen to the cell because of cyanide poisoning. Next is it can prevent different enzyme. Enzyme inhibiting is also done. One, what does it do? One, it forms complex with the enzyme, because of which target molecule cannot come and form a complex with the enzyme. So stable complex is formed by cyanide. Other way is by denaturing or blocking the formation of enzyme itself. So enzyme is not produced at all by from the apoenzyme. So these are the two ways it denatures the enzyme. So a small amount of cyanide is enough for creating cyanide poisoning in the body. Next is, how is cyanide working? The reason why cyanide works so fast is that it has high affinity for iron. And you know that iron is a part of heme protein in hemoglobin and myoglobin. So it binds immediately to the iron that is present in heme protein of hemoglobin and myoglobin. So iron is unavailable for carrying oxygen from the lungs to the tissues. So oxygen deficiency occurs in the lungs and tissue. Because it is binding to the iron of the hemoglobin, iron is unavailable. Hemoglobin cannot function properly. It cannot take the oxygen from lungs to tissue, because of which in tissue there is shortage of oxygen. This particular situation is called as hypoxia, and since it is caused by poisonous substance, it is called as histotoxic hypoxia. So in this case, what happens, the brain is affected first. The person who is affected like this, it loses consciousness for a few seconds and then becomes brain death. That is, the maximum time for cyanide poisoning is 4 to 5 minutes and the person will be dead, because once your brain is dead, then no other body part will function, correct? And then one more way is that certain enzymes in our body cells, like cytochrome oxidase containing iron and copper, they act by providing, they provide electrons for the reduction of oxygen in the cells. That is, cytochrome oxidase, is an electron providing protein, correct? So it gives electrons for the reduction of oxygen in cells. What does the cyanide do? Cyanide ties up those electrons that is given, and it does not make this electron available for reduction of oxygen. So that way it is blocking the pathway. It is taking up the electron itself than reaching the electrons to the cell. It takes up the electron itself, and thus cyanide brings an end to cellular respiration, because reduction of oxygen will not take place in the cells. There is end of respiration and there is death immediately after few seconds. So, what is the antidote that is given in case of cyanide poisoning? One is, it is very difficult to save a person after antidote, cyanide poisoning, because it is so quick. It happens within minutes, and the person is dead. So, giving an antidote is very very difficult. But if the person has consumed cyanide in a dosage that is less, so quantity consumed is below the lethal dose, that is 50 milligram, then you can give antidotes like sodium nitrite and sodium thiosulfate, which can be used to treat cyanide poisoning. So these are the different antidote mechanisms in which cyanide poisoning can be detoxified or treated. First one is scavengers. Under scavengers, what we are using is methemoglobin fumes. Okay, they are used for rapid detoxification of cyanide, that is prevention or reversal of inhibition of cyanide of cytochrome c oxidase, that is they are trying to control, inhibit the process of inhibition of cytochrome c oxidase. You know that cyanide affects the cytochrome oxidase. It makes it inactive and it takes up the electron given by cytochrome oxidase by binding to cytochrome oxidase. So prevent that, methemoglobin fumes are used. Okay, so what is done is that this is usually accomplished by providing a large pool of ferric ion in the form of methanoglobin to compete cyanide. And you know that cyanide has high affinity for ferric ions or iron. So cyanide, instead of forming complex with cytochrome C oxidase, it will compete with Fe plus 3, and it will go and form a complex with the Fe plus 3 of the methanoglobin. So eventually it binds with the fume to form cyanomethaноglobin. So it was supposed to form a complex with cytochrome oxidase and stop it from functioning normally. But now we are giving methanoglobin fumes, because of which cyanide will prefer to bind to Fe plus 3 of the methanoglobin fumes, and then it will form cyanomethamoglobin. The second method is detoxification. So here under this group, the agents are listed which can, this is an enzymatic process where there is enzymatically we can detoxify cyanide by converting into a non-toxic product and then eliminating it from the body. So this reaction, it is an enzymatic process which is catalyzed by different enzymes that may be present in our body, or it might have to be given exogenously from outside. And also we can give more substrate for the enzyme. In this case it is sulfur donors. So one of the enzyme, which is a mitochondrial enzyme, rhodase, it is involved in the conversion of cyanide to thiocyanate. So cyanide is metabolized in our body to less toxic thiocyanate, and then it can be excreted from the body. And this process of conversion of cyanide to thiocyanate happens in the transsulfuration process, and this process is catalyzed by rhodase and MST. This rhodase, it is a mitochondrial enzyme which catalyzes this reaction of conversion of cyanide to thiocyanate. Next is physiological method. Here we are using oxygen. Oxygen is a physiological antagonist which can prevent cyanide poisoning. So now you know that oxygen alone in hyperbaric pressure has side protective effect to cyanide poisoning. So the cyanide, it inhibits the cytochrome oxidase, correct? So it does not deplete the availability of oxygen. That is, oxygen is still there in the body. But what does the cyanide do? Because of cyanide inhibition of uh, cytochrome oxidase, the cellular utilization of oxygen becomes less, but oxygen is still there. So, what does oxygen do to bring the condition to normal is that the intracellular oxygen tension will be high enough to cause non enzymatic oxygen of reduced cytochromes, or oxygen may displace cyanide from cytochrome oxidase by mass action. That is, one is cytochrome will be converted to reduced form by cyanide. What does the oxygen do? It does oxidation of the reduced cytochrome to give oxidized cytochrome. That is one way. And one more way is oxygen displaces the cyanide from cytochrome oxidation by mass action. Next, in biochemical method, how exactly this process happens, the mode of action is not understood, but they're using chloromazine. So here its protective effect was attributed by its alpha hydrogenic blocking property. It has the alpha hydrogenic blocking property, because of which it can sustain calcium homeostasis in the cells, and also it can maintain the membrane integrity by preventing peroxidation of the membrane lipids. So membrane integrity can be maintained, it won't be disrupted because of cyanide, and also it can maintain the homeostasis in the cells. Next, last one is carbon monoxide. So, how is carbon monoxide getting generated in the nature? Is one is different natural process like volcanic action, natural gas emission, electrical discharge, lightning, marsh gas production, etc. will contribute to carbon monoxide. But major contribution of carbon monoxide is also due to human pollution. That is transportation, agriculture, burning, and forest burning, industrial process will give out different gases, because of which carbon dioxide will go and accumulate in the atmosphere. So there are 130 million tons of carbon monoxide is accumulated in the atmosphere, that can stay to 36 to 110 days in the atmosphere. And then this carbon monoxide, it attacks. What does it do? How is the mode of action? It attacks the hemoglobin. That is, oxygenated hemoglobin is attacked by carbon monoxide. It displaces the oxygen to form carboxyhemoglobin. So the oxygen carrying capacity of the hemoglobin is reduced, and effective oxygen carrying will not take place because of carbon monoxide going and binding with the oxygen carrying protein, that is hemoglobin. So what happens to a person who is undergoing, who has CO poisoning is initial case, there is loss of awareness and judgment. Because of this, the person cannot think straight, and that can lead to various automobile accidents, that's road accidents. And with increased carbon monoxide exposure, it can lead to death, because the person will not be able to breathe. There will be unavailability of oxygen to breathe. How is this cured? Is that the person is exposed to fresh oxygen, and you know that hemoglobin, it has cooperative effect. When the person is exposed to more of oxygen, the oxygen will come and replace the carbon monoxide and bind to form oxygenated hemoglobin. So the reverse process that happened there will happen here. So that is one solution to prevent, detoxify carbon monoxide poisoning. Okay, and carbon monoxide toxification, it can also occur because of inhalation of methylene chloride vapor. So it is a volatile liquid that is found in solvent like paint removers and different solvents, tanners, etc. And when this methylene chloride vapors are being inhaled, it also leads to carbon monoxide poisoning. So if your skin gets exposed to methylene chloride, there is no much effects, but there might be dermal burns. That is, skin burns might be present in the skin, and rarely methylene chloride, if it's being inhaled by us, it can show delayed carbon monoxide toxicity. That is because the liver metabolizes the inhaled methylene chloride to CO. So liver is responsible for the metabolism of this methylene chloride to give carbon monoxide, and this methylene chloride, whichever we have inhaled, it also stays in our tissues and is being released in our body continuously, because it's being accumulated in the tissue. That way, CO gets accumulated in the cells and tissues. Okay. leading to carbon monoxide poisoning. So one is direct exposure to carbon monoxide, one is by the inhalation of methylene chloride vapors. How is the treatment done? First thing we have already told, that is breathing of pure oxygen. That is in the emergency rooms or hospital where you're made to breathe pure oxygen, and then spending time in pressurized oxygen chamber. If the condition is extreme, then that person might also need hyperbaric oxygen therapy. So with this we have finished with the metal ion toxicity topic. Thank you for attending my class. Take care and bye.